There's an anti-feminist YouTube user by the name of Sargon of Akkad, and a few days ago he recently made a petition addressed to universities, no, not a specific university, not even universities within a specific location, just universities generally, okay, good luck with that, calling on them to temporarily suspend what's called social justice courses. Now, at no point does Sargon actually define what he means by social justice courses, but nevertheless, his reasoning is as follows. Social justice has become scientifically illiterate, logically unsound, deeply bigoted, and openly supremacist. Openly supremacist? Well, who or what is it that they are promoting supremacy of? It doesn't really make sense for you to say, oh, they're supremacist, without actually saying how they're supremacist. Social justice professors are indoctrinating young people into a pseudoscientific cult behind closed doors that is doing damage to their health, education, and future. That's a very sweeping statement. First of all, you have to explain what you mean by social justice professors, give a clear definition of that. You also have to explain what your criteria is for indoctrination, what counts as indoctrination, and you have to demonstrate that what you call social justice professors are doing what you call indoctrination. And this doesn't mean, you know, there are professors who have left-leaning views that are expressing these views to their students, okay? I don't see how that's indoctrination. Social justice has become a victim of its own good intentions, and in the desperate attempt to make the world better for some, it is creating a world better for none. It has become another ideology fit only to pave the road to hell, so it is time to turn around and choose another path that is concerned with reason, science, and improving the lives of every human. First of all, the way that people in your camp seem to use the term social justice warrior, they use it to refer to anyone who's even remotely left-wing. Like, maybe someone who's a little bit liberal, you know, they're a social justice warrior because maybe they advocate some form of feminism. And also, I'm apparently a social justice warrior because I'm an anarchist and a communist, right? Yeah, there's just a huge spectrum of ideas there, and you're just treating it as this monolithic body, despite the fact that there are huge disagreements within this spectrum. That's really careless. Also, just a general rule of thumb that I have when I'm interacting with people on YouTube, if they throw around terms like science and logic and reason, and really fetishize this idea of hard science, you can generally bet that their knowledge of these subjects probably extends to the fact that they've read a few articles on Wikipedia about logical fallacies, and therefore think that they're some kind of fucking genius. To clarify, we are calling for the teaching of social justice courses in universities to be temporarily suspended. What follows is up for debate, but as it stands now, social justice is causing far more harm than good, and it must be halted and reassessed. There are a number of reasons why this is a batshit idea. First of all, you haven't defined what you mean by a social justice course. Is it any course which involves looking at left-wing ideas like Marxism or feminism? If that's the case, then the possible span of what counts as a social justice course is huge. Let's take sociology, for example. Karl Marx, whether you like his ideas or not, had a very significant impact on the development of modern sociology as a field of research. If you study sociology, you are inevitably going to come into contact with Marx because of the impact that he had. If you study sociology without looking at Marx, you have not got the full picture of how that discipline has developed. An education on sociology which completely omits any mention of Marxism is an incomplete education on sociology. That is a straightforward fact. If you take sociology, it's also likely that you'll end up covering people like Herbert Spencer, who come from the complete opposite end of the political spectrum to people like Marx. You don't have to agree with Marx's perspective. And if you disagree with Marx, then perhaps you should practice what you preach and actually explain why you disagree with Marx's ideas and why you think they're wrong. And in academia, provided that you can give evidence from reputable sources for your claims, that's perfectly okay. That's what you should do. You shouldn't just throw the toys out of the pram and say that we should just suspend any discussion of Marxist ideas in academic institutions because they come to conclusions that you disagree with. Another example is social anthropology. If you study social anthropology, you're going to look at different human societies through the ages. And if you do that, one thing that you are inevitably going to come across is the fact that there have existed human societies that have more than two gender identities. That is a historical fact, whether you fucking anti-feminist people want to admit that or not. And it means that if you study gender norms across different human societies, you're going to have to engage with ideas about social construction of gender. You don't have to agree with what the feminists have to say, but if you're studying social anthropology, it's inevitable that you're going to come into contact with feminist theories about where gender comes from, including the idea that gender is socially constructed, whether you like these ideas or not. And if you don't like these ideas, again, why don't you practice what you preach and engage with them and criticize them instead of going on this moral crusade to try and censor left-wing academics? Philosophy as well, there's another one. If you study ethics, you're likely to have a conversation about bioethics, and that means you're going to be engaging with feminist arguments about abortion and reproductive rights, whether people have the right to have an abortion. That's going to be something that you engage with. That comes under social justice. Political philosophy, there's another one. You're going to end up coming into contact with Marx, again, because he was a hugely influential figure in the development of left-wing political ideas. History, that's another one. You might end up studying the abolition of slavery, the black civil rights movement, the history of women's rights. You might also learn about the history of British colonialism, because that's a thing that happened. All of these topics can arguably come under social justice, and if we omit them from history courses, the result is an incomplete education on history. So we've got history, philosophy, sociology, social anthropology. All of these are now incomplete if we omit any discussion about so-called social justice topics. So we've decimated the humanities, great. Let's move on to the arts. What about English literature? So if you study English literature, you're likely to come into contact with authors and poets who are influenced by certain political ideas, including feminism. So do we suspend any analysis of, feminist authors and poets just because it comes under social justice? What about media analysis? If you study that, you're inevitably going to analyse how different groups in society are represented in films and on television, including women and ethnic minorities. Does that come under social justice? And again, it just seems like this is just going to decimate our education on various different topics. I'm currently studying an undergrad in classical music, and we recently just finished a module about women in opera. We had a feminist lecturer come in and give her perspective on how women are represented in operas from the period of 1800 to 1935. Again, it's discursive. We're allowed to disagree with her, provided that we give evidence for our claims. That's perfectly fine. But does that come under social justice because it's talking about, feminism and how women are represented? Again, this seems like an incomplete education. The irony in all of this is that right-wing anti-feminists are constantly whining about how, feminists are coming to take away their free speech, and how, creating safer spaces is somehow just about creating some kind of ideological echo chamber, and yet here they are, lining up in droves to say that we should stop people from learning about certain subjects in educational institutions because it might mean that people will come to conclusions that they disagree with. Talk about fucking thought policing. Talk about an ideological echo chamber. I mean, this just comes straight out of UKIP, banging on about how, oh god, we've got to get back ideological control of the universities because they're all controlled by Marxists. It's bollocks. But you know what? Despite the fact that the idea of completely suspending social justice from universities is completely batshit and would result in an incomplete education across multiple different fields of research, I'm still going to say that, if you want to sign Sargon's petition, go and fucking sign it. It's a petition. It's of no consequence whatsoever. And honestly, I just find it hilarious that this is what you think activism is. Or we're just going to fucking sign a petition that vaguely says, oh, we don't like social justice in universities, right? It's just like, I'm just imagining this as just being a collective, that's your attempt at activism. Sargon, you're just a fucking idiot, honestly. This is ridiculous, and just get a hobby, mate. Get a hobby.